Today's Bay Area Innovator is Matt Gonzalez, who served on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors in the early 2000s. In 2003, he made a notable run for San Francisco mayor as a Green Party candidate, narrowly losing in a runoff election to Gavin Newsom.
People always assume that we don't like one another or have conflict, but when I see him, it's always very cordial. You know, we ran a spirited campaign against each other. We had very different views, and the voters chose who they wanted, and that's that.
He joins us today as the chief attorney for the San Francisco Public Defender's Office.
Some of the southern governors sending migrants in planes and buses to Martha's Vineyard and things like that. The Democrats have responded by saying, oh, this is performative. Yes, you're right, it is performative, but what is the solution? We're going to provide more financial support from the northern states to have to also bear some of the responsibility for this. But your answer can't simply be, it's performative, right? It's got to also be truthful about the impact that's happening.
This is Bay Area Innovators, and I'm your host, Steve Espas. Matt, welcome to our program.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic to have you here. So, you had an amazing career. You've been through so many different chapters in your career.
I've lost a lot of political contests, if that's what you mean.
Well, yeah, but still you had a lot of different chapters, and I kind of see a pattern in your career, be it the Board of Supervisors, be it the running, the 2008 and the mayor's election, and your current position as the chief attorney. You've kind of rooted for the underdog, or you helped the underdog, and yourself, you were the underdog in these elections sometimes, and sometimes you came extremely close. What's your motivation for public service and for helping the other underdog?
Well, you know, I got into politics a little bit accidentally. You know, I didn't wake up one day and say, oh, I want to be in politics. And it wasn't really a lifelong dream or anything like that. I think my path was similar to the path of many other people, which is they find themselves in a situation that they're frustrated with and they want to propose change. Oftentimes it might be planning commission is making a decision about your neighbor constructing something and you're opposed to it. Or maybe your children are in the school district and you don't like what the school board is doing. And those things kind of get you going and you decide, hey, I can do that. I can do a better job than the decision makers. My first race was in 1999. I actually ran for district attorney. I was a young public defender because I had conflict with the district attorney's office at the time. And so a little bit out of frustration, definitely had a lot of opinions that I thought, hey, this is a better way to do criminal justice work. And so I got into that race. It was the following year that because I had run, people in politics that I had made alliances with encouraged me to run for the Board of Supervisors. It was now going to be district elections, and I was elected in District 5 and served one term.
Tom Amiano played a role in your getting involved, right?
Tom was an early supporter, you know, certainly because of his credibility and notoriety that helped people take my candidacy seriously, yeah.
Let's talk a bit about the 2003 mayor election. I don't know how much chance you were supposed to have, but you came in extremely close. There was a runoff election, and you ran against Gavin Newsom, and it was, I think, 47 to 53%. But what's interesting is that he had these heavyweights supporting him, anywhere from Bill Clinton, Al Gore, you know, all the heavyweights in the Democratic Party, and he was still that close. Can you talk about that?
It was an interesting race because there were about 5 or 6, what I'm going to say are major candidates, people that held some kind of elective office, or the chief of police, the city treasurer, supervisors, former supervisors, that sort of thing. It was basically a contest for who would compete against Newsom in the traditional runoff. So there were a lot of candidates running, were in opposition to him. He got into the runoff with a high number of votes. He had over 40% of the vote.
But not enough, not the 50%.
Right, but I finished second with 19% of the vote. So that shows you there were votes really spread out widely. I wasn't very well known. I was in my first term in government. We had not really spent a lot of time trying to promote me as a candidate for the future. I made it into the runoff, but once you're in a runoff, it's a two-person race, and people start maybe paying a little more attention or looking closely. And I had a lot of people start realizing that, hey, maybe the things I was talking about made sense. It was a very different election than the mayoral election that's happening right now in San Francisco. When Newsom and I ran, there were a lot of points of disagreement, whether it was how we were going to do business taxes or planning issues or public safety. Today, I've listened to some of the mayoral forums. The candidates sound so similar that it's very hard to evaluate who's different. And the differences are mostly what their backgrounds are. If you're a Daniel Lurie and you haven't been in government, you promote that. You say, well, the others have failed, vote for me. If you're an Aaron Peskin, you can talk about, you know, all the things you've done while you were in government. He's been a supervisor, so he doesn't have the power that a mayor has, so he's not to blame for all the things that have happened in the past, and makes a strong case that, you know, many of the things that we don't like would be worse had he not been there. That sort of thing. You have each candidate trying to carve out their difference in experience, but it's not really difference on the issues.
Why do you think there is? Is it more of a common, unified decision or a way of thinking for the candidate?
You know, when you're looking at issues and you're a candidate, you've got an opponent, one of the best things you can do is think about an issue differently than your opponent, because then you're sharing with the electorate how you're going to govern and how you manage thought process. But I think a lot of the candidates right now are fearful of being the outlier on an issue and disregarded by the voters because they're not in step. I'll give you an example. I was surprised to learn that all the candidates support the Proposition 47 reform. It's going to be on the state ballot, Prop 36. One of the big arguments is that, oh, you know, by reducing the threshold between misdemeanor and felony theft, we've increased thefts. Not that we've increased them, but that there's been an explosion in this kind of activity. And I understand people are frustrated with the issue, but when you look at the data, you know, there's a long decline in crime in San Francisco from the 1980s, 1990s to today. You know, the crime rates in the 80s, I mean, today, you're probably looking at maybe 75% reduction in violent crime. There's probably 80% reduction in property crime. People don't believe it. Yeah. But all the policy groups that have taken FBI statistics and the statistics collected by municipalities will show that. So one of the issues is, well, why do people feel differently? Well, they feel differently because we're bombarded with imagery from public cameras making us feel that crime is out of control. The $400, moving it up to $950. Interestingly, 40 states have thresholds above $950. Texas has $2,500, South Carolina has $2,000. And when I started as a young lawyer, 1990, if you took that $400 in an inflation, took inflation into account, you would, $1 back then is worth $2.40 now. So 400 would be $960. I know I threw out a lot, but my point is a good candidate would stand in front of that and say, no, 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 no. We may have crime issues and we want to keep working to make our community safer, but this is not the measure for it. Instead, everyone's like, oh my God, crime is on everybody's mind. There's no point in talking about the statistics, and I better support Proposition 47 repeal, or, you know, no one's going to take me serious.